History is plagued with many strange events and discoveries that certainly leave their mark. Some of these accounts are far more strange than others and pave the way to an uninviting, creepy past. Number 5. In June of 1972, a break-in had occurred at the Democratic National Committee headquarters, which had been located in the Watergate complex in Washington, D.C. The criminals had been linked to President Richard Nixon's re-election campaign. They had been wiring the phone and stealing confidential and sensitive documents. The Watergate scandal was set in motion on the 17th of June in 1972, when all of the 5 criminals had been caught and arrested. 4 of them were involved in Central Intelligence Agency work against Fidel Castro. The last burglar, named James W. McCord Jr., had been a security chief of the president's re-election committee, known as CREEP. This was guided by President Nixon's previous Attorney General, John Mitchell. Ron Ziegler, the president's press secretary, stated that Nixon would not be commenting on the burglary attempt. Media reports and a White House campaign supported the idea that the Nixon organization had no involvement in the break-in, nor did the re-election committee. While this was said, the criminals were in the process of getting rid of all of the evidence, including the equipment they used. The CREEP deputy director had even burnt the transcriptions of the wiretaps that were installed during earlier intrusions into the headquarters. Although a thorough setup ensued to throw the media off the trail of Nixon's involvement, an order given by Nixon himself which forced the FBI to clamp down on the investigation, later revealed a crucial piece of evidence. This was the Nixon tapes, which were recordings of his phone conversations in the Oval Office. This important find had been used in proving President Nixon's involvement in covering up the criminal act. One of the biggest mysteries concerning this case is that of the Watergate tapes. With many hours of conversations being recorded, an 18.5-minute gap is found in the middle of the 20th of June 1972 recording. Nixon's secretary, Rose Mary Woods, had been tasked with transcribing these tapes before handing them over to prosecutors. In 1974, she explained to the judge that she'd been using a dictaphone. The dictaphone had a pedal which would pause the tape once she lifted her foot. She stated that she deleted the section of tape by mistake. According to Woods, she'd been listening to this tape when the phone rang. She kept her foot on the dictaphone pedal and then pushed the wrong button, apparently clicking record instead of off as she reached for the telephone. She furthered this by saying that she had accidentally recorded over that section of tape, but stated that she probably caused a 5-minute gap at most. Judge John Sirica, who was seeing to the Watergate criminal trials, had established that the deletions had been done in 5 different and adjoining pieces. Unfortunately, the missing segments were unable to be recovered during the trial, thus opening more questions and mysteries to the entirety of the case. Sirica had also hounded the witnesses as well as the defendants on events which were left uncovered, such as the financial involvement of the White House and the campaign. As the hearings continued, McCord had passed the judge a letter explaining that they'd been pressured to plead guilty and lie under oath of the involvement of those higher up from them. It was believed that the International Telephone and Telegraph Corporation had been investigated for having ties of financial corruption to the White House and had sabotaged the election in Chile. Furthermore, the previously mentioned Mitchell may have played a part in the interference of a securities fraud case, which was of a $250,000 donor to the Nixon campaign. In the midst of April, the president made a public announcement where he stated that his very own investigators discovered that no one in this administration had been involved in the event. Later that April, Ziegler told the media that the statements made by the White House regarding Watergate were inoperative. On the 30th of April, Nixon gave another publicized account where he announced the resignation of his closest aides. Nixon proclaimed his own innocence and even promised to be cooperative in the investigations yet to come. However, the missing information on these recordings remains a mystery and would be helpful in many ways. It seems quite obvious that the recordings had segments purposefully erased in order to protect one party or another, possibly proving the involvement of Nixon. Without the knowledge of what had been said here, this remains undetermined. It would be rather unsettling to find that a well-trusted figure who runs the country is involved in such scandals. Nixon would later be impeached and eventually resigned. Number 4. Most Indian villages are well known for their crops and harvests, as well as their cleanliness. However, one of these villages seems to bear human copies continuously over the years. The Kodini village has one of the highest twin birth rates in India. The village appears like any other until you start to pay attention to the residents. This is where you'll find a number of identical faces popping up. This village also earned itself the nickname, the Twin Town of India. With a population of approximately 2,000 people, over 400 of them are twins. Abdul Hamid and his sister Kuni Kadia were the oldest twins living in the village. They're now 67 years old. Since their birth, and possibly ones undocumented before them, more and more twins began to pop up. On average, 4 twins are born out of 1,000 babies around the world. India has a 9 twin rate per 1,000 babies. But in this village, 45 twins per 1,000 births are recorded, making it the second twin capital of the world. It's believed by the village that the twin births are a gift from the gods. Throughout the years, many scientists fascinated with this phenomenon have tried to figure out the mystery. Such scientists from institutions such as the CSIR, Center of Cellular and Molecular Biology, University of London, and Kerala Universities of Fisheries and Ocean Studies, or KUFOS. Additionally, German scientists have also visited this odd village. These researchers have taken saliva and hair samples to study the DNA of the twins. However, this did not lead to much of an explanation, and the village twins remain a mystery. A professor of the Institute of Tropical Medicine investigated the studies of 4 areas where numerous twin birth cases have been reported. This included our strange Kodini village, as well as a Vietnamese commune, Nigeria, and Brazil. These studies would determine if the case had been of a hereditary nature, but it was found that there's no genetic link discovered for identical twins being born, and the understanding behind it is yet to be confirmed. Another researcher, Dr. Krishnan, also found himself interested in the science behind the delivery of the village's twins. He addressed that many researchers had tried to find an explanation for the mystery, but could not, and that this was a miracle in the medical world. He concluded that the reason behind the production of all these copies had something to do with the diet of the village. However, this is unconfirmed because the eating habits of the Kodini villagers are not much different from the rest of Kerala villages. No substance has been found to be responsible. Dr. Krishnan explained how strange it was that the village bore so many twins since the whole of India saw a rather low rate of twin births. He furthered this by saying that twins are usually born to more mature women, but this had not been the case in the Kodini village, where women age between 18 and 20 when they're bearing twins. Other researchers and doctors postulated that a large amount of twin births could have something to do with chemicals in the water of the village, but this remains an unsupported theory. Those studying this occurrence often leave with more questions than they do answers. In 2008, 15 pairs of twins were born in the town, and that had been out of 300 births. Adding to this oddity was that even some of the people who move away from the village get married and still give birth to twins. The situation, aside from being a little creepy, also bears another set of problems. That being the teachers of the community struggle to identify which twin is which, and the locals face the same issue. But an even bigger problem would be that some couples regularly mistake their partners for their partner's twin. The number of twins seems to increase with each year that passes. It was also discovered that women generally have a height of 5 foot and 3 inches. However, the recorded average height of the women in Kodini is just 5 feet. The village dwellers apparently do not exhibit any fear of their strange situation, and are proud to be a part of the Twin Town, and have established the Twins and Kin Association, or TAKA, which registers and supports the twins of the village as well as the families there. This is due to the fact that raising one child can be quite expensive, and therefore raising 2 of them could prove challenging for this village, and it's also a demanding job for the mothers who give birth to them. The association also takes it upon themselves to educate the villagers. Since 2006, it's reported that the number of twins has started to accelerate. One villager detailed the story of 2 twins who began the startling discovery of the twin anomaly. The sisters were in grade 8 when they noticed 8 pairs of twins present in their class. They found more twins in other classes too and set off to conduct a survey. This produced the discovery of 12 pairs of twins in their school. After this finding, the other villagers started noticing this as well, and soon after this survey, it was found that 280 pairs of twins existed in the whole village. Apparently, this anomaly had been ignored by the community because they'd been a part of this system for ages and did not realize how unique the village actually was. It remains undetermined, yet a plausible theory, that the occurrence could be a result of the region in which they live, since there's nothing in their food and nothing in their water and no out-of-the-ordinary aspects in their DNA. The only thing left to consider is the climate. However, this is quickly passed off due to the fact that even those who move away still bear twins and more twins. One resident also explained that the villagers used techniques such as hairstyles and birthmarks in order to tell the twins apart, stating that he combs his hair to the left and his twins is combed to the right. The village people of Kodini are undisturbed by this incredibly creepy anomaly and seem to enjoy their newfound fame. Number 3. In December of 1873, a creepy event found itself at a hotel in Bristol, England. Mr. Thomas B. and Mrs. Anna Martha Cumston had found themselves traveling to Bristol on the 8th of December when they booked into a simple yet comfortable hotel with the hopes of a peaceful vacation. During the evening, the couple had heard odd noises in their hotel room. This was immediately reported to the innkeeper, Mrs. Tongue, who did not make much of it, even though she too had heard the noises. The Cumstons decided to turn in, but were awoken around 3 in the morning to yet another set of unusual sounds. They quickly got out of bed, but the floor felt strange as well. They discovered that it had been eroding away right underneath their feet. Mrs. Cumston screamed for help, hoping the innkeeper would hear her cries, but it was soon discovered that their voices had a hollow quality, or an echo of sorts, making their shout unheard and unnoticed by the proprietor. The floor began to open, and Mr. Cumston was being pulled inward, where he was quickly grabbing to safety. This caused so much terror in the couple that they left hurriedly through a window, escaping into the night. It was reported that they believed that villains had broken in and were trying to kidnap them. The two found themselves at a railway station and caused such a scene that they were actually arrested for disorderly conduct. But when they appeared in court, the innkeeper vouched for them and testified that she had heard the noises as well and didn't see any criminals or villains in the hotel. An investigation was carried out and the hotel was examined by police officers. The examination turned out to be futile, and the court ruled that the Cumstons had been victims of a collective hallucination and were released. Mr. and Mrs. Cumston explained to the court that they heard odd noises coming from the vicinity of their bedroom, and then again at 3 o'clock in the morning. A newspaper report had been released a few days later, and it was far more detailed. According to the article, the couple had been arrested for disorderly conduct as well as letting off a firearm at the Victoria Hotel, Templegate. According to Mrs. Tongue, when the first noises at 1 o'clock had been heard, she had told the couple to go to bed but was later woken at around 4 o'clock to the sounds of screams, and she reportedly heard the mention of a knife and a pistol. She promptly called for assistance but was too late and found that the couple had exited through the window. The distance from the window to the ground was at least 12 feet. The innkeeper also explained that she had not seen the couple before and they left all of their luggage at the hotel in their room. The superintendent of the railway station, Thomas Harker, said that at 4 o'clock in the morning, he had been in the booking office when he was interrupted by someone barging in and screaming murder. He continued to state that he exited onto the platform where he saw both of the Cumstons nearing the express platform. Mrs. Cumston appeared to have been very excited, and according to Harker, her hair was floating around. The two tried to explain that they had been victims of thieves, but most of their ranting was not understood. Harker took them into the office to attempt to calm them down, but they continued to get excited. He then took them to a waiting room where he still couldn't do anything to appease them. He had also sent one of the men to find an officer. He reportedly stated that Mrs. Cumston had asked Harker to check if anyone had been following them and that her husband had a revolver. The mayor who was seeing to the case asked Harker, who testified as a witness, if it seemed as though the couple had been affected by alcohol. He said that they didn't, and he thought they were actually insane. According to Constable 321, he had been called to the hotel and then to the railway station, and there he found the two to be rather calm. He furthered this by stating that he believed the sudden outburst to be of fright because they did seem very frightened. The The constable found 3 sharpened blades and a revolver. Mr. Cumston asked the constable whether or not he saw the gap which opened in the floor, but he hadn't. Mrs. Cumston then gave her version, where she explained that they became frightened after the 1 o'clock noises, and then again at 3 or 4 o'clock. She reported that the floor opened and that she asked Mr. Cumston to fire his revolver in order to scare off any intruders that may be nearby. They climbed out the window and she asked him to fire again. She was then asked if she heard any voices, to which she responded that she heard whispering and everything they had said seemed to be repeated back to them. A telegram was sent to acquaintances of the couple, and in the span of an hour, a man had shown up and told the court that they were friends of his and were in a good position and of sound minds. Although it was stated that the couple had experienced a shared hallucination, that would not account for the innkeeper hearing noises as well. The two had genuinely seemed frightened and convinced that someone had been after them. However, given that nothing out of the ordinary had been found, it's difficult to say if they were being followed or had a break-in. Since both Mr. and Mrs. Cumston were both rational and sane individuals, it doesn't seem likely that this was a delusion of some sort. This historical case remains unsolved and is certainly rather spine-chilling. Perhaps that specific hotel room is home to a few ghosts, or the couple was subject to breathing in something odd which initiated the occurrence. But they probably would not have seen the same things if this had been the case. Number 2. Over the years, archaeologists have come across many artifacts and carvings, as well as scripts, which seem to detail the presence of aliens during the ancient times. This concept is well documented and brings about many theories. Another such case that many people may not have heard of is that of alien wars that were documented through China's historical scripts and other carvings. Some artifacts and ancient scrolls seem to depict that an alien war took place. According to some of these old texts, it was determined that an alien race had come to Earth to enslave the Chinese and force them into building different structures. A rather unusual discovery was made when researchers were deciphering the text on some oracle bones. These bones had been unearthed in China as well as Siberia. The information that was found within these scripts is also present in many Chinese murals and other carvings. The ancient texts were written in an archaic language, and they stated that this alien war had lasted about 500 years. The ancient world, however, did not have a calendar at the time, but through more deciphering of murals and texts, it's believed that the alien invasion took place in the 30th century BC. The story of the invasion went as follows, according to the texts and scrolls. Somewhere in the 30th century BC, at least 300 years prior to the calendar, aliens invaded the northernmost area of China, where they then enslaved the ancient people and made them build different structures, some of which are pyramid-like constructs which are said to harvest energy from the earth by using pipe systems or act as a return base if the aliens come back. It's believed that many of these structures are spread throughout China. However, the government denies their existence despite there being many reports from people having discovered these exact structures and have even photographed them. Although many revolts took place against these aliens, they remained undefeated due to the fact that the otherworldly visitors had a technological advantage. That was up until the Chinese were aided by a group of indigenous giants who stood 12 feet tall and had red hair. It's stated in these scrolls that these giants existed on every continent all over the world during this time. The beings had come from the northwest area where they began to fight to free the Chinese. The civilization wore leather suits and had a great amount of power and were able to snatch up the aliens from the sky. This caused the remainder of them to flee back to wherever they came from. It's since been 5,000 years since the documented alien invasion, and they've not returned to China or other parts of the world in an attempt to save the human race again, although another carving was found that suggested that the aliens hadn't left. This apparent carving, found by scholars, was discovered on the coastline of the South China Sea. These scripts and carvings not only originated in northern China, but also in the southern region of Siberia. Although most of this information has been documented on tortoise shells and bovine scapulas, some of the stories and accounts were documented on silk and rice paper, but little of this survived through the ages. The remainder of these silk and rice paper writings revealed that the aliens had come from a star system, which is yet to be identified by modern scientists. In Guangdong, China, another startling discovery was made by a researcher. This had been a rock carving depicting an alien species, which seemed to match up with the descriptions found in the ancient text. They were said to be of a slim, tall build and wore a helmet of sorts, which was also equipped with a breathing feature. The helmets had 3 antennae that resembled bamboo. A village in Guangdong also held an important piece. This had been a rock painting of what's suggested to be aliens wearing the helmets that were described in the text. The depictions of modern aliens and the ones described in the ancient texts are eerily similar. The extraterrestrials spoken about in movies and books and the occasional UFO encounter paints them as being tall and thin and having some form of antennae. They also tend to arrive from some unknown location and try to force the human race into some sort of labor, which is expressed in the murals, carvings, and scrolls. According to a scientist, Dr. Zechariah Sitchin, he viewed a similar event in Sumeria. He claimed that they and other ancient civilizations recorded being enslaved by alien races and had even mined minerals and gold for them. He included that they also wrote about having to design and assemble pipes to draw gold from the earth, and this is consistent with the Chinese scripts, stating that the pipes were used in harvesting energy for the aliens. Discoveries such as bronze masks and other artifacts that have been found in an archaeological site in the southwest region of China seem to depict a race of aliens wearing helmets. It's believed that these sculptures support the idea of the invasion of extraterrestrials that was recorded in the ancient Chinese scripts and Siberian carvings. One such image is that of an old Asian scroll, which depicts a person standing in front of a small UFO. This image features symbols written above the UFO, but it's not a Chinese or Japanese language. It's the symbols that accompanied the UFO when the man had stumbled across it, which he detailed to the artist. The pyramids that these societies built may also have various secrets leading to the proof of this alien war. Some of them are being guarded by the Chinese government and others are extremely difficult to find. In 1912, Fred Schroeder had come across various pyramid-shaped features in the forests of China. He recorded that he saw a giant pyramid standing 1,000 feet tall, and it was surrounded by smaller pyramids. 3 decades later, James Gossman, an Air Force pilot, spotted a white structure while gliding over China. According to him, the construct was twice the size of the Pyramid of Giza. The same event was reported 2 years later by Colonel Maurice Sheehan. A German investigator had searched for the pyramids which were mentioned in these reports, but he was unsuccessful. Many of the sites which have been found are guarded under the reason that excavating them would only damage the structure. Many important secrets may be held within these constructs, but for now, we'll never know. The pyramids may prove what is written in these ancient scrolls of pipes and mining, and this would certainly prove the creepy mystery of an alien war on the Chinese during the 30th century BC. Number 1. Over the years, for many decades, there's been an influx of reports concerning George Washington's apparition appearing to the visitors of the Mount Vernon mansion. Most of these appearances had taken place in the beginning years of the Mount Vernon Ladies Association. The ladies would sleep in the mansion when they were at Mount Vernon. This string of ghostly activity even made its way into the New York World newspaper in 1890. It was explained here that the most interesting part of the mansion had been the bedroom where George Washington would sleep. The newspaper article states that this particular chamber is haunted. Many visitors who had slept there would report that the president would appear to them as a ghostly figure. They supported the idea that this was not just a figment of their imagination. It was also expressed that many of these people had gotten very little sleep while residing there. It was agreed by these occupants that Washington still visits his old room during the night. One such account happened to Mrs. William Beale and her friend when they slept in the mansion one night. They had requested Washington's room. During the night, the candle they lit began to flicker before going out with a noise. This startled them so greatly that they got up and dressed themselves. They even sat around the room until morning came, alarmed by every small noise in their vicinity. According to the Tube, they even heard Washington's sword making a distinct noise in the corner of the room. In the 1980s, another apparition appeared to a witness at Mount Vernon. An interpreter found herself in the central passage on a crowded day. The woman believed she heard someone in the opposite room where visitors were not allowed to be. She claimed that she entered the little parlor to chase them off, and there she found an older man with a large mustache. His attire suggested 19th century or early 20th century clothing. He had his sleeves rolled up as well. When the man found that he had an interpreter's attention, he began to shout, demanding to know what was going on. The woman explained that she'd been trying to quiet down some people and suddenly the man disappeared. Later, the interpreter saw a portrait resembling the man that she had seen. Unexpectedly, she came to find that the man was Colonel Harrison Howell Dodge. He was Mount Vernon's director for 50 years until his passing in the 1930s. The same woman also reported seeing the figure of a lady who wore 18th century clothing. She had been descending the stairs carrying a bowl fitted with an arrangement of flowers. The apparition also quickly disappeared. She had felt something touch her when coming out of the little parlor. She looked down to see the feet and skirt of a young girl. The skirt also resembled 18th century attire. According to one of Mount Vernon's guards, these occurrences happened frequently and would not be a one-time thing. Between the 1980s and 90s, there was a frequent event which occurred in the stables. Often, the stable alarms would sound, strangely in the same amount of time it would take for someone to unsaddle a horse and put it away, and make their way to the bedroom chamber. The second set of alarms from the bedroom would sound. When guards would go to investigate, they would find nothing out of place or anyone lurking around. The guard explained that he believed that Washington would be returning home on his horse, who he made comfortable before retiring to his room. One night in 2010, security guards had been driving on the mansion's grounds when they saw a young lady on the pathway. They stopped and suddenly the girl appeared right next to them. It was reported that the two had driven away from the scene rather fast. In more recent years, as recent as 2012, one of the Mount Vernon Security Department members explained that his first ghostly encounter had been in the early stages of the candlelight tours. His encounter found itself on the anniversary of Washington's passing at 10:30 p.m. The man told the story of that evening after the mansion had been cleared of all people and he locked himself inside. He began to check the alarms when he found himself in the mansion's study. Directly above the study was Washington's bedroom chamber. He stated that while he was in the study, he could hear the sound of heavy keys in the above room. Upon making his way to the bedroom, the noise had suddenly stopped. It was said that Washington was known to carry around a set of keys that could often be heard while he was walking around in the mansion. Washington's secretary, Tobiah Lear, had removed said set of keys upon his passing. Another interpreter recounted one of her experiences at Mount Vernon in 2016. She explained that on the 15th of December, 2016, there were reports of strange noises and dropping temperatures on the third floor. The interpreter explained that she'd been on the third floor on the 14th, which happened to be the anniversary of Washington's passing, but she did not experience anything out of the ordinary. However, the following evening, she found herself in the southwest area, looking into the bedroom chamber where she saw an electric candle burning. Initially, she thought that one of the caretakers had switched it on, but it later occurred to her that the day after Washington had passed away, Martha Washington switched to the southwest chamber. The interpreter concluded that she believed the candle had been turned on by Martha's ghost. Similar accounts had been noted in a newspaper article on the 1st of March in 1913. The title read, "Many ghosts still haunt corners of public buildings of Washington, D.C." The article read that in the Mount Vernon mansion, one may find a ghost or two if they search for them. It also details that the kitchen is connected with the mansion by a covered walkway, with the floor being hollow underneath. On quiet evenings, footsteps can be heard here, reportedly pacing back and forth. The article further goes on to say that although George's ghost had not been seen, those who slept in his room had felt a brooding presence. They describe it as the nearby presence of a ghost. As noted, George Washington was not the only presence here. According to one of Mount Vernon's youth program team members, she had her own strange experience. Her office had been situated in the Teacher Resource Center. The staff had left and it was getting late, so the teacher gathered her belongings to set off back home. However, when she returned, she saw a woman's figure standing in the office doorway. She had been wearing attire from the Civil War era, and she had been an eerie gray color. The woman stated that the ghost's expression was stern and she didn't move. Then suddenly, the ghost was gone. The woman believed the specter to be Anne Pamela Cunningham, who was the founder of the Mount Vernon Ladies Association. One of the eeriest encounters in the mansion had been in 2006. A supervisor belonging to the History Interpretation Department explains that this experience took place in the mansion's yellow room. The supervisors were tasked with clearing and locking the mansion after double-checking that all visitors had left. This supervisor had been letting the last interpreter out of the study when they began walking up the stairs. This incident occurred near Washington's bedchamber once again. A room called the Yellow Room is situated past Washington's bedroom. This is where the supervisor was heading. In the Yellow Room, she reported that she felt a person's hands on her shoulder. As she turned to see who it was, there was no one there. It was clear to her that her presence was not wanted in this particular room. This had been a frequent reoccurrence up until she decided to bring an interpreter with her. This time, nothing creepy took place. However, the next time she was alone, she was once again pushed through the room. From then on, the supervisor used a different set of stairs in order to access the central passage and lock the door. Thank you guys so much for watching. If you like this video, be sure to hit that like button. Also, don't forget to subscribe and click that notification bell to keep up to date with all of our future uploads. But my name is Ty Knotts, and I'll catch you guys in the next video.